Доброго ранку усім! Ви знову на навчальному курсі «Муніципальні партнерства для європейської інтеграції», який підготували для вас Cities for Cities в рамках програми Polaris «Підтримка багаторівневого врядування в Україні». Мене звати Марта Супрун, я є експерткою з європейської інтеграції на місцевому рівні. І сьогодні ми вже втретє зустрічаємося, щоб поговорити на ще одну актуальну тему, яка стосується європейської інтеграції і саме європейської інтеграції на місцевому рівні. Сьогодні поговоримо про співпрацю з інституціями ЄС і трошки пізніше, після такого короткого мого вступу до нас доєднаються дві прекрасні лекторки, які поділяться своїм досвідом співпраці з Україною, які представляють різні європейські інституції. Від себе скажу, що я з нетерпінням чекала сьогоднішньої лекції, тому що ми в Cities for Cities багато організовуємо візитів делегацій на різні європейські події до Брюсселю, де ми маємо можливість зустрічатися з представниками різних європейських інституцій, і знання про те, як функціонують ці інституції, за що вони відповідають, насправді допомагає тим, хто регулярно бере участь в таких поїздках, ефективніше комунікувати. І тут хочу підкреслити саме слово «комунікувати», тому що діалог – це така основна форма взаємодії з європейськими інституціями. Не слід одразу ж при якихось зустрічах з посадовцями ЄС презентувати свої проекти, тому що воно так не працює, але працює інакше. Як працює, будемо розбиратися сьогодні. Наші спікерки сьогодні будуть презентувати свої інституції ЄС, в яких вони працюють, англійською мовою, тому хочу нагадати вам, що ви можете під'єднати функцію синхронного перекладу у нижньому робочому полі Zoom. Якщо у вас виникають якісь технічні питання, будь ласка, пишіть у чат, наша команда буде старатися вам допомагати. Також хочу нагадати, що ви можете отримати після проходження цього курсу не лише наш сертифікат, але і сертифікат Національного агентства з питань державної служби. Ми вчора поділилися посиланням на як це можна зробити у чаті. Я думаю, що ми продублюємо цей лінк ще раз сьогодні. І бачимо, що вже понад 100 людей зареєструвалося. Якщо вам потрібен сертифікат для підвищення кваліфікації, ви можете по завершенні курсу успішному обміняти наш сертифікат на сертифікат НАЦО. Також заохочуємо вас активно проходити уроки в кабінеті на платформі Академії Cities for Cities, відзначати, що ви пройшли той чи інший урок, проходити тестування, тому що тільки після завершення кожного уроку ви зможете отримати доступ до фінального тесту, за підсумком якого, власне, ви можете отримати сертифікат. З організаційних питань це все. Будемо переходити вже до лекційної частини і до моєї такої базової презентації про європейські інституції, як вони взаємодіють з громадами, регіонами, представниками субнаціонального рівня. Зараз ви побачите, мабуть, що мою презентацію, я сподіваюся. І найперше, про що хочеться поговорити, і насправді ми про це чули вже і вчора, і в перший день тренінгу, це про цінності, на яких ґрунтується ця взаємодія між європейськими інституціями і місцевим рівнем. І саме тому ми вибрали і назву сьогоднішнього тренінгу, яка звучить як «Співпраця». Ми багато чули про принцип партнерства, який інкорпорований в політику згуртованості ЄС вчора. І фактично є ця абетка європейської інтеграції для місцевого самоврядування, якою слід послуговуватися, яка визначає ті засади, принципи і цінності, на яких будується ця взаємодія. Найперше – це принцип субсидіарності. Фактично, цей принцип закладений в установчі договори Європейського Союзу. Ви бачите, стаття 5 договору каже про те, що спільнота європейська діє лише в тих межах і покриває ті сфери, які не можуть покриватися іншими рівнями управління національним, регіональним чи місцевим. І що європейська спільнота і європейські інституції, вони, власне, не виходять за межі тих тем, які є спільними для європейської спільноти. Так? І другий важливий аспект – це багаторівневе управління. Це повага до компетенцій, спільна відповідальність і співпраця між різними рівнями управління в Європейському Союзі, між європейським рівнем, між державами-членами, регіональними місцевими органами влади, як в процесі прийняття рішень, так і в імплементації політик і оцінці впливу цих політик на різні рівні управління. Насправді основою всього є Європейська хартія місцевого самоврядування, яка прийнята Радою Європи, і Україна теж ратифікувала Європейську хартію з питань місцевого самоврядування. І саме ця хартія визначає право органів місцевого самоврядування відстоювати свої інтереси, в першу чергу об'єднуючись в асоціації і проводячи на міжнародному рівні адвокацію своїх інтересів через своїх членів, через, власне, асоціації і різні міжнародні об'єднання цих асоціацій. І тут варто теж всім знати, що на європейському рівні існує ЦЕМР, це Конгрес місцевих і регіональних влад Європи, так, який об'єднує асоціації різних країн-членів і також країн-кандидатів. Зокрема, я нещодавно, буквально вчора, прочитала публікацію міського голови Калуша, який був делегований Асоціацією міст України в політичну раду ЦЕМРу. І ми бачимо, що навіть не будучи ще країною-членом, Україну запрошують до керівних органів цієї загальноєвропейської асоціації. Ми знаємо, що інші асоціації теж прагнуть стати членами ЦЕМРу. Це ж фактично і ЦЕМР, і національні асоціації країн-членів, країн-кандидатів пророблюють найбільш ґрунтовну роботу з лобіювання інтересів місцевого самоврядування на європейському рівні і найбільше взаємодіють з інституціями ЄС, фактично, які беруть участь у процесі прийняття рішень на рівні Європейського Союзу. Як ви, можливо, знаєте, Європейська комісія є основним органом, який володіє законодавчою ініціативою в Європейському Союзі. Далі це рішення проходить через процес консультацій в дорадчих органах Єврокомісії, це Комітет регіонів. І сьогодні з нами вже незабаром до нас доєднається Наталія Доля, яка є представницею цієї інституції, і також Європейський соціально-економічний комітет, які надають свої рекомендації і висновки. І ви бачите, як цей принцип багаторівневого управління практично інкорпорований в процес прийняття рішень у Європейському Союзі. Далі це рішенням, ця законодавча ініціатива має бути схвалена Європейським парламентом і Радою Європейського Союзу. Звичайно, існують різні законодавчі процедури, на цьому не будемо тут зупинятися, але важливо, що асоціації місцевого самоврядування і їх об'єднання, такі як ЦЕМР, взаємодіють з інституціями ЄС ЄС практично на кожному рівні прийняття рішення і прийняття європейського законодавства. І ми в програмі Polaris, яка опирається теж на шведський досвід, маємо змогу спостерігати, наскільки активно представництва асоціацій в Брюсселі взаємодіють з представниками Європейської комісії, Комітету регіонів, для того, щоб відстежувати вплив цих законодавчих ініціатив саме на громади Швеції. І тут, мені здається, є широке поле для обміну досвідом, і така діяльність асоціацій, звичайно, буде надзвичайно важливою і корисною в процесі європейської інтеграції. Повертаючись до моєї улюбленої діаграми цього курсу, так, про різні розділи законодавства і те, як вони впливають саме на місцевий рівень, нагадую вам, що більше половини розділів і практично понад 70% законодавства в цілому містять конкретні питання, які є важливими для місцевих органів влади. І, звичайно, що ці питання відносяться до компетенції різних директоратів Європейської комісії. Вчора ми мали можливість спілкуватися детальніше з представницею DG Regio, Генерального директорату з питань регіонального розвитку і місцевого розвитку, місцевої політики. І ми згадували розділ 22, але, звичайно, ми розуміємо, що цей широкий спектр питань, які важливі для місцевого самоврядування, не можуть бути охоплені лише діяльністю якогось одного директорату. Сьогодні, якщо говорити про Європейську комісію, хочу зазначити, яка є її структура, так, тобто очолює Європейську комісію президентка Європейської комісії. Ми маємо 27 тематичних комісарів, які є політичними представниками країн-членів. Ми маємо генеральні директорати, які, як спрощено можемо порівняти з нашими міністерствами, які відповідають за політику в тій чи іншій сфері, як за її розробку, так і за її імплементацію і моніторинг. Ми маємо агенції, які створюються директоратами Європейської комісії вже для управління тими чи іншими програмами. І, звичайно, маємо адміністративні департаменти, які допомагають обслуговувати цю так велику систему всередині Європейської комісії. І ми бачимо, що цей спектр питань, які важливі для місцевого самоврядування, відноситься до відання різних, насправді, директоратів, і не тільки директорату з питань регіонального і міського розвитку DG Regio, але також ви бачите, що сільське господарство і сільський розвиток управляється директоратом DG Agri. Загалом дуже багато є абревіатур, до яких нам слід призвичаїтися. Так, важливим директоратом в контексті захисту навколишнього середовища є DG ENG, DG Кліма, також департамент EAC, який відповідає за розвиток політики в сфері освіти, молоді, спорту і культури. І, звичайно, що коли українські муніципалітети вже зараз мають можливість брати участь в певних тематичних програмах ЄС, таких як, наприклад, LIFE, Горизонт чи інші, саме цими програмами управляють агенції, які відповідають за оголошення конкурсів, за формування цих програмних документів і все інше. Так, тобто тематичні програми, коротко хочу нагадати вам, до яких Україна має доступ, і особливо наголосити на тих, які, на нашу думку, можуть сприяти розвитку взаємовигідних муніципальних партнерств між українськими і європейськими громадами. Вчора ми детальніше зупинялися на темі політики згуртованості ЄС і того, як вже сьогодні Україна може брати участь у європейській територіальній співпраці, яка теж відноситься до відання цього директорату. Хочу також наголосити і ще раз пригадати вам 5 основних цілей політики згуртованості ЄС. Ми вчора почули, що багато нового з'являється у новому програмному періоді, принаймні в пропозиції цієї багаторічної рамки, яка зараз знаходиться на обговоренні у Європейському парламенті. І, звичайно, що сьогодні також до нас доєднається представниця ще одного директорату, який не напряму відповідає за якийсь конкретний розділ, так, але відповідає за розширення і політику добросусідства в Європейському Союзі, ENG Nest, і Анна Котляра зможе детальніше трошки пізніше розповісти про те, як Європейська комісія слідкує за прогресом України у впровадженні євроінтеграційних реформ, і як Європейський Союз вже зараз допомагає Україні як країні-кандидатці наблизитися до критеріїв за кожним із розділів, які ми згадували вже раніше. І зараз насправді час згадати про Комітет регіонів, який є насправді голосом громад в ЄС. Я буду рада зараз за кілька секунд представити нашу першу сьогоднішню лекторку Наталію Долю, яка є координаторкою з питань Молдови і України комісії ЦІВЕКС Комітету регіонів. Насправді ми мали можливість вже неодноразово, як Cities for Cities, доєднуватися до подій і заходів, які організовує Комітет регіонів на підтримку України. І я сподіваюся, що сьогодні теж Наталія зможе поділитися з нами загалом і тим, що таке Комітет регіонів, яке його місце в структурі ЄС, і як українські громади вже сьогодні можуть взаємодіяти з Комітетом регіонів. Нагадую вам, що ми перемикаємося зараз на цю частину лекції на англійську мову, тому якщо ви відчуваєте таку потребу, будь ласка, під'єднайте функцію синхронного перекладу у нижньому полі. Natalia, welcome to our training course, Municipal Partnerships for EU Integration. It's very nice to have you here in our course, first of all. It's really amazing how much the Committee of Regions do to support Ukrainian local governance, to support EU integration on local level, and I hope that you could tell us a bit more about what Committee of Region is, maybe what it is not, so that we all better understand how to approach Committee of Regions and how to interact with you and its members.
Hello, you can hear me right?
Yes, all fine.
All good, and I can start, or we need to wait a little bit?
Okay, so we will now switch on the presentation which Natalia prepared. And we will see it now. Yes. Natalia, what's going on in Brussels in the Committee of Regions while we are still launching your presentation? I've heard very important debates around the future of the cohesion policy, which is central to local governance and not only on local level but on regional, right?
Indeed, indeed. Good morning to everyone, and yeah, thank you for having me. And yeah, if we talk about the big priorities for the European Committee of the Regions, as the negotiations on the next budget have started, there is lack of certainty about the future of the cohesion policy. And so the top priority of the president of the committee is to actually try and fight for that, to defend the role of the local and regional authorities and the funding that they can get and their role in policy making and in decision making. So yeah, it's a top priority. So let's see where we can get. But yes, indeed. Otherwise, the sun is shining. It's warm in Brussels, and you tell me when I can start, and I will get into it.
Slides. So why do we need the Committee of Regions in this structure of EU institutions? I mean, I wanted to say that, Marta, you in your introduction, you have spoken a lot about cohesion already, from what I understood, about subsidiarity. So I assume that all the participants that have been listening to you, I mean, they now understand this major concepts. And these concepts are behind basically the establishment of the Committee of the Regions. And just to say that we are a relatively young institution, we were established in 1994. We are also maybe less known institution, but it doesn't mean that we are less important. I mean, we still do have a role to play, in particular in policy making of the EU. So as Marta also have been already said, so we are the voice of the European regions and cities. We are like a bit of a mini parliament, if you would like to have a kind of a bit simplified definition of what the committee is. And the main goal is to give local and regional authorities the voice in EU decision making, so that the needs are reflected, that our interests are reflected, that our role is understood. And of course, it is also about bringing EU closer to citizens, because the local and the regional authorities, they are the representatives of the communities, they are interacting with the communities in a very direct manner. So how EU is actually known is when the EU projects are implemented in a specific city or in a specific village, and people do see it and they actually know what it means to benefit from being a member of the European Union. And when the members of the European Committee of the Regions meet, so they also try to exchange best practices, you know, what works in one member state or didn't work in another member state, in specific sectors. They exchange best practices and try to improve. Of course, I mean, all the member states have more experience than the newer member states, so there is a bit of this exchange and capacity building. So you can, I guess, go back to a bit. So as I've said, it's like a bit of a mini parliament that is representing, we have in the EU about 300 regions. We have about 100,000 of the local authorities, and this includes the subnational parliaments.
and about 1.2 million of the local and regional politicians. And out of these, the committee has in total 329 members. And the way they are elected, it's actually the member states who propose the members of the for their country to sit in the committee. And it depends on the size of the population of each of the member states. And when they do the nominations of the members, they have to respect certain criteria, which includes the political breakdown. It includes a geographical balance, territorial balance, gender balance to the extent possible. So all these issues are considered. So the member states then they are proposing. So as I say, the number of members that each member state has depends on their population. And then these lists are actually approved. They're submitted to the European Council, and they approve it. Okay. So this is how it works, and they have the mandate which lasts about 5 years. And just to say that local and regional authorities in general, why they are also important, it's about they are responsible for 70% of the legislation of the EU. They are responsible for 70% of the EU legislation for its implementation. So that is why, I mean, if we want to implement, I mean, we need to make sure that we move forward.
So in your presentation, I see like that Germany, France, Poland have like over 20 members here in the slides. So is it defined depending on the size of the country, the population?
Exactly.
So I mean, if Ukraine or when Ukraine joins the EU, so it would be approximately the same number of the members of the Committee of Regions that has to be delegated, right?
Exactly. Yes, indeed. But again, respecting certain criteria. So
yes, that's good to know. So what my personal impression was when I visited the Committee of Regions is that it's also like a particularly very important chance, not only for mayors of bigger cities, but also for smaller municipalities to have their voice in the EU, and to have this equal treatment between different municipalities of different size, because no matter if you represent a million city or a small mountain municipality, you are treated equally and you have equal voting rights and equal opportunities to promote the interests of your municipality or other municipalities. Back to our presentation.
So the criteria is very important in the nomination of the members. So that to ensure inclusiveness as much as possible. And you're right, yes, when Ukraine becomes the member, this is what will have to happen. But actually, we will talk about Ukraine later. And there is something that Ukraine will already have to nominate members for cooperation with the Committee of the Regions, hopefully in the course already of this year. But let's talk about this later. So to come back to a little bit how the committee works. So once the members are nominated and approved, so then they can also choose to be a part of one of the parties. So we have now 6 political groups, which a bit resembles the political breakdown that exists in the European Parliament. And you can see that the biggest party is the European People's Party, followed by the Socialists, and then the centrist Renew Europe. We also have like 26 members who belong to the Conservatives. So I mean, it's a bit reflects the political dynamics across different kind of member states, but at the EU level in general as well. Okay, an important an important fact is that members of the Committee of the Regions, this is not their full-time job, okay? So their main job remains their local or regional mandate, okay? So they continue to live and work in their cities and villages, but they come to Brussels to meet in specific meetings and in the plenary and in the meetings of the specific commission. So it is the mandate it's an add-on job, so to say, for them. Unlike the members of the European Parliament, for whom it is a full-time job to serve as the member. Okay. So now we have the leadership. You can see on the slide the president of the Committee of the Regions. Now we have Kata Tutter, who is a Hungarian lady from the city of Budapest. So the president is elected for 2.5-year term. So she will, I think, stop her term will stop at the end of this year, and then the current vice president will take over for the rest 2.5 years of the mandate. Now, I think Marta also already spoke about it in terms of how do we fit as the Committee of the Regions in the context, in the broader context of the EU institutions. Now you can go back to the earlier slide. Yeah. So if we look at the so you know about the European Parliament, you know about the European Council and the Council of the European Union, you know about the Commission. So we are advisory bodies together with our sister institution, which is the European Economic Social Committee. So this is where we are labeled in green, and you can go to the next slide. So yes, the key word is advice. Okay, so what we do, and this is the key task of the European Committee of the Regions, this is our day-to-day business, is to produce opinions on specific EU policies that are priority to the local and regional authorities. It is in some areas, it is mandatory for us to be consulted, okay? But whatever opinions we issue, the Commission is not obliged to take it into account, okay? But it is, so that is why it's important also for the members of the European Committee of the Regions to do a lot of advocacy and a lot of lobbying when the opinion is being prepared and after opinion is being adopted. So we're trying to engage as much as possible the European Parliament. We try to engage as much as possible the Council of the European Union. Of course, the Commission, which is submitting the proposals in the first place, in order to make sure that our proposals find their way into the final legislation of the EU. So yeah, here, as I said, I mean, if we look at the next slide, so here are the areas where there is a mandatory consultation of the European Committee of the Regions. But it doesn't stop here. So sometimes, for example, if the European Economic and Social Committee is consulted, they are informing us and we can decide whether to issue an opinion or not. And also we have the possibility to decide on our own that we would like to issue an opinion on specific policy which doesn't belong to any of these areas. So for example, at the moment, there are discussions ongoing internally about the temporary protection for the Ukrainians in the EU beyond March 2027. And the European Committee of the Regions, there is a decision now that we will actually prepare an opinion in this regard. And this is going to be an own initiative opinion.
Thank you, Natalia. We already have a question from our participants of the course, and I think it's high time to answer it. And we encourage all other participants to place their questions in the chat. We will try to ask them all. Natalia, could you explain a bit more in detail how the representatives of different countries join different political groups in the Committee of Regions? At what stage do they choose to which party they belong? And does the membership in any specific national party have impact on what political group they join?
Yes, indeed. I mean, so they, from what I understand, I'm still also new in the European Committee of the Region, so I do not know everything. From what I know about this process is once the members are approved, so yes, they decide the political, the choice of the political group that they get into depends a little bit on their political affiliation at the national level. And there are different, of course, interactions as well going on between different parties, between different member states, and also at the EU level with the specific member states. And this is how the decisions are made.
Yeah, maybe I would also add to this, having previous experience in politics, that in fact, all national political parties, they become members of the all European political parties. In Ukraine, we have really very strange situation where majority of Ukrainian political parties are members of EPP family, like observers. So it's really very interesting how this could be like this Ukrainian delegation, which in fact should represent like different parties, different opinions, will be formed, because as far as I know, like the majority of parties who are members of European political parties are representatives of EPP family. But thank you for this question. So we come back to our presentation and to key portraits and functions we have in this.
So in the European Committee of the Region, so there are 6 main commissions, thematic commissions, and each of them has their own chair. And this is where opinions are allocated, you know, depending on the thematic area of work. So then one particular commission gets to be in charge. And then the rapporteurs are being also nominated in order to lead one or another opinion, which also depends a little bit on some of the political games. You know, some of the members they're trying to compete sometimes for the specific opinion if it is high on the priority of high political priority for a specific party. So they play some games in terms of who is gonna be responsible for one or another opinion. And then, of course, from the secretariat side, where I sit, I mean, we do help with the preparation of the opinion. We also have an extra commission which deals with internal matters, budgetary matters, which is called CAFA, but this is kind of less important. So this is just, again, this slide is another reflection of what commissions we have. I will not go into the details. And we can move to the next slide in terms of the biggest priority. And this is already what we touched upon in the beginning. It's about the next budget and the future of the cohesion policy. I hope through our work, through the advocacy of our president and all our members, we can try and defend it in a good manner across in this our interinstitutional bubble and negotiations. And it was really great, actually, to see for the first time our president addressing the General Affairs Council in order to present our case and to make sure that people understand actually what the local and regional authorities mean and what they do. I mean, I've been on the other institutions before, and kind of it is not natural to think of cities and regions when you really work at the national level. Kind of it comes a little bit as a self-implied, you know, but it is not really the case. I mean, when you really go into the details about what their role is concretely, it's incredible. So, and we need to continue advocating for that.
Absolutely, and we had yesterday we discussed a bit the new proposal for the new year, and we know that many changes to cohesion policy are there in this proposal, and there will be this national partnership plans and more programs combined together. If you would just say very shortly, what is the main concern of the Committee of Regions here?
Yeah, exactly. So the main concern is that, I mean, there is a lot of focus on simplification okay? Because I mean, the EU is too complicated and the regulations are too complicated and it's just too many. And one of the way that the Commission is proposing to simplify a little bit the implementation of the next budget is by indeed having this national and regional partnership plans at the level of individual member states. But from our side, we see it as a little bit of a centralization. And what we say is that simplification should not lead to greater centralization, because we have been decentralizing and now we're going to be again centralizing. And this is not a correct way to go when we also look at the key values of the European Union. We are also a little bit concerned that for this NRPPs, the National Regional Partnership Plans, how actually the local and regional authorities will be consulted. I mean, so they will have to negotiate directly with the national governments, but what also if politically the national government is different from the different city, will there be certain trade-offs, will there be less inclusiveness? So these are the main concerns. So if the NRPPs will be the way to go, so we are actually pushing for some mandatory requirements in terms of how the regional and local parts need to be developed and need to be implemented, so that there is still a level of independence for the cities and regions in this respect. Okay, so let me just mention also the big probably the biggest annual event of the European Committee of the Regions. This is the European Week of Regions and Cities, and the Ukrainian colleagues have participated in quite big numbers last year. So this is where a lot of interaction is happening. Many people are in Brussels. We are organizing it together with DG Regio. It's about discussing all different topics and issues that are of relevance to the local and regional authorities. This is where we also can engage with other EU institutions and really spread the word and to create more networks. And in 2025, for example, we have 3 dedicated events specifically for Ukraine. And there were also some meetings in the margins, including the meeting between the chair of the working group on Ukraine and the Ukrainian mayors that were attending the week. Okay. So now let me briefly move to our collaboration with Ukraine specifically. Some close interaction have started in 2024 after the Maidan revolution, which kind of a little bit made a signal that Ukraine is getting closer, or would like to get closer to the EU. And in 2015, the government of Ukraine started going towards decentralization, and we decided to create a task force in order to help in this process. And in 2020, this task force was transformed into the working group on Ukraine, which exists up until now. And actually, there is a process is ongoing to, let's say, upgrade this working group, because the working group, it's our body, okay? We created it, but we created it also to engage with the Ukrainians, but it is a little bit led by us as the Committee of the Regions. So the next step in terms of evolving partnership between Ukraine and the Committee of the Regions is to establish the Joint Consultative Committee. And we are waiting for the legal basis. And perhaps Anna Kotlara, she will mention more about the state of play. But we are getting close basically to being able to start the nomination process of members. And this is how it relates also to what I spoke about, the nomination of members of the Committee of the Regions overall. So once we have the legal basis, we will be approaching our counterparts in Ukraine. I mean, we will approach the Ukrainian mission to say that now you will be requested, you are requested to nominate members of the joint consultative committees, and we will also request to comply with specific criteria as it is done for the members of the Committee of the Region. So political balance, geographical balance, gender balance to the extent possible. So let's see when we get there, but we are getting close basically to the possibility of having the Joint Consultative Committee established. So the other, another important angle of our work with Ukraine is focusing on reconstruction. So, I mean, the working group and the JCC that is going to come, I mean, the focus is on supporting Ukraine on the path to EU integration, on the path to EU accession, in terms of reform processes, capacity building, the participation in EU policy making. I mean, to make sure that local and regional authorities are ready by the time they can join the EU. So this is one stream of work, and this is what you see on the right. On the left, you see is because of the ongoing war and a lot of focus on Ukraine's reconstruction and a lot of resources, financial resources being given by various donors, including EU and EU member states. So we have established the European Alliance of Cities and Regions for the Reconstruction of Ukraine, so the key objective is to advocate for the needs and interests of the local and regional authorities, that whatever support is given, that it also reaches the cities and regions on the ground. So in terms of, for example, what we do, I mean, let me just also emphasize that the Committee of the Regions, we are a political body, okay? We are the political voice. We're able to do advocacy, to mobilize all the different politicians and to make our needs heard. What we do not have is, unfortunately, the big financial resources to manage to implement projects and programs. So we can help to maybe push for certain program and projects, but we do not have financial means to implement them. So this is why we end up also with producing political, for example, documents, and the Alliance, we try to, on an annual basis, to issue some sort of joint statements or joint declarations where we trying to identify and push for the top priorities. So, for example, the focus at the moment following the joint statement of last year, and as we prepare for the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Gdansk that will take place in June this year. So we are trying to expand the membership of the Alliance, okay? So we want to reinforce basically the political voice. So it doesn't come with any obligations to become members of the Alliance. So it is open to the Ukrainian cities, it is open to the EU cities and stakeholders who play a role in supporting Ukrainian cities and regions. So if you are not a member, please consider becoming one. As I said, there are no obligations. But you are welcome to become part of the network, to attend regular meetings of the Alliance where we share different projects, different studies. We try to consult you on the opinions of the Committee of the Regions. So please consider joining. So this is the one priority is to expand the membership of the Alliance. And the second priority is about trying to have a formal dialogue with the Ukraine donor platform. Because, I mean, their platform, they talk to the civil society, they talk to business, but not yet to the local and regional authorities, okay? So then we also pay a big attention to partnerships between cities and regions. And in this regard, we have developed together with ULEAD a project which is called Tips for Ukraine. And they provide training and they try to put the cities and regions in Ukraine and in EU together in order to exchange experience, to build capacity, and to grow the networks, so to say, for further joint projects, hopefully, and for the partnerships that become sustainable. What we also, in efforts to expand the kind of partnerships, we also trying to now pay more attention to the win-win narrative. And I know that Cities for Cities is particularly doing a lot of work in this regard. So it's not only about what EU can offer to the Ukrainian cities, it's about what the Ukrainian cities can offer to the EU cities, especially in view of the political priorities that we have at the moment, linked to security, defense, and resilience, and disinformation, and innovation in the emergency and crisis situations. So yes, I spoke already quite a bit about the enlargement, this is just to touch base again that we are really looking forward to the establishment of the Joint Consultative Committee, to upgrading the working group, so that we can engage with the Ukrainian partners on a more equal basis. So it will be much more of a partnership that we will have, and I think the voice of the Joint Consultative Committee will be much stronger. So as I was telling about the next budget, so when we are trying to push, and defend the role of the local and regional authorities overall, when it comes to Ukraine, whenever there are dedicated resources that are being discussed as part of the EU budget, so we advocate also for some share for some specific programs that will be allocated for the local and regional authorities. So we will continue to do that, and we're already doing this in the context of specific opinions. For example, the opinion on Global Europe, which incorporates and covers cooperation with all countries, including Ukraine. So this is what we continue doing. So we also issue different studies. This is the tool that we have. A little bit of financial resources that we get, so we can conduct specific studies that can contribute to collaboration with the EU candidate countries. And so you can see here some of the examples. What we also do for Ukraine is that we are able to offer office space. Okay, so some of the cities, and you can see here the list, you can be represented and do your own little advocacy for the city that you represent or for the region that you represent by being in Brussels. Okay, so they work independently, but they're located on the premises of the CUR, so there is an application process that needs to be followed, but there is this possibility. So we also have been trying to mobilize our members and trying to support and provide safe space for the Ukrainian children through the summer camps initiatives. And we continue to do that. And we do get good response from different member states. Another stream of work is the program that we have as the Committee of the Regions. It's called Young Elected Politicians, and it is open to Ukraine and other candidate countries since 2023. So if you know good mayors who demonstrate good potential for the future of Ukraine, please encourage to apply. I mean, this year, the deadline for applications, I think, is tomorrow, actually, but the application process is very simple. So if you know young mayors who can be a good candidate, please spread the word. And finally, we also have the Mayor Pavel Adamovich Award, which has been created in honor and in memory of the mayor of Poland, Polish mayor, because he was assassinated in 2019. So now we have this award to acknowledge important contributions by specific mayors, and for example, Vitaly Klitschko received that award in 2024, but then other also mayors of Ukraine have deserved to have a mention. So this is what it is. If you want to know more, please do not hesitate to reach out. I'm available for questions. And as I say, consider joining the Alliance, and I am looking forward to further engagement.
Thanks a lot. I think we all learned something new about the Committee of regions, how it functions and how it advocates for the interests of European municipalities and regions and for the interests of Ukrainian local governance. We are really looking forward to the establishment of the Joint Consultative Committee, and we thank Natalia for her presentation today. Have a nice day, and we're always happy to see you in our training courses and podcasts. Thank you very much for the cooperation.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure, and all the best with the continuation of the course.
Thanks a lot. So now just touching upon one another important issue that Natalia mentioned. Так, переходячи на українську мову, хочу зазначити, що Наталія згадала, що наступний бюджет Європейського Союзу містить в собі кошти під такою категорією Global Europe, яка містить також кошти для України. І в цій пропозиції, яка, звичайно, ще зараз не прийнята, але є на розгляді в Європейському парламенті, ми бачимо, що цей обсяг підтримки України зростає. Тобто зараз ми маємо Ukraine Facility, який, я сподіваюся, ви всі добре знаєте про Ukraine Facility і про це те, що українські муніципалітети можуть отримувати кошти для реалізації проєктів з цієї програми макрофінансової підтримки України. У новому періоді бюджетному ЄС в пропозиції, принаймні, ці кошти подвоюються, йдеться вже не про 50, а про 100 мільярдів євро підтримки, і сподіваємося, що Європейський комітет регіонів також буде активно відстоювати і допомагати українським асоціаціям, муніципалітетам відстоювати роль і участь органів місцевого самоврядування в реалізації проєктів в рамках цієї макрофінансової підтримки. Про це і не тільки про це. Поговоримо з нашою наступною лекторкою. До нас доєднується Анна Котляра, яка є спеціалісткою з питань децентралізації і регіонального розвитку DG ENG. Це є директорат з питань розширення і добросусідства Європейської комісії. І ми знову перейдемо на англійську мову. Anna, welcome to our training course. Really, in my intro to this today's lecture, I already mentioned very briefly about DG ENG and how much your Directorate General is doing to promote the reforms on the way to EU and to support also Ukraine in achieving these goals and benchmarks, because of course we do not need to be EU members per se. We need to change our way of thinking, we need to change our standards, and we really want that ordinary citizens in Ukraine feel these benefits of being the part of EU family. Welcome to the course, and I hope you could tell us more about DG ENG and how it actually interacts with Ukraine and particularly with Ukrainian local governance.
Sure. Thank you so much, Marta, for this opportunity to speak with as what I gather is a very substantial amount of people joining us today for the lecture. I truly think that having such course lectures that we have this one day off, but what you've already had is a good insight into one of the kind of main ways how also in DG ENG we interact with the local level. So apart from kind of being the watchdogs in the Commission on Reform Progress, One of the ways how we kind of interact is dialogue, and we meet. And I've met quite a few representatives in Brussels over my time in my Ukraine service unit in DG ENG. And much of the work, how we engage with the local level in Ukraine, relates to open dialogue, to exchange of priority information of what still needs to be done, what are the local needs. And therefore, when we say what the mission of DG ENG is, it's to take forward the EU's enlargement and Eastern neighborhood policies. And it really comes down to the not only government, but the symbiotic work between the government and the local level and the citizens to take the country as a whole forward, because the reforms, they're not just legal acts that the government are writing. They are, living organisms that are implemented on the ground, and that's what the local level ensures and does. You might have noticed that there are two elements. There is enlargement policy and Eastern neighborhood policy, and Ukraine would be within the more enlargement policy at this time. I'm just saying this because we have a whole different presentation that a colleague can do on the neighborhood policies. So that's why I want to make this distinction. And if we go to the next slide, where you have the thematic priorities of where we kind of divide the directorates in DG ENG. There are we look at a scope of activities and actions that would support a candidate country on their mission to kind of meeting the membership criteria. And these involves also promoting EU values and policies and interests, a lot of which are also what Natalia had already explained, what they stand for at the Committee of the Regions as well, be it from a local perspective. And then, of course, democratic consolidation, and we look at strengthening prosperity and stability and security in the enlargement countries, because it makes sure that when the country joins, they can be a full-fledged member at the same level as the present EU member states that make up the Union. And of course, to do that, we have programs. You have already mentioned the Ukraine facility, which is the driving force currently in our engagement with Ukraine. And this provides for financial and technical assistance that we envisage or are able to attribute to a candidate country. There are other different types of programs which are made available to Western Balkan countries, because those are just like a different type of instruments available. You might have heard the pre-accession instrument. So it just shows that we take the status quo of each candidate country quite seriously, and we try to make sure that our engagement with that candidate country reflects the needs that the candidate country has. And then let's go to the next slide. Thank you. This is where we come to enlargement policy, and the enlargement policy is currently where Ukraine is going through. So this is what you have heard, that Ukraine did the screening process of 32 chapters, and then we had developed opening criteria or opening benchmarks that Ukraine should complete as part of the accession process. And then there are, of course, for each of the thematic chapters, the closing benchmarks that show the kind of level of preparedness where Ukraine has to be, or what Ukraine has to achieve by the time when Ukraine says that they're ready to join. So kind of this whole process of accession is mapped out, and it falls under the enlargement policy as a whole. Скажите, будь ласка. Oh, so sorry, that's not a question for me. I thought it was a question for me in the chat. But anyway, so the enlargement policy, mainly for us, means that we want to make sure that the elements of democratic and economic reforms, stability, peace, and prosperity, and democracy, rule of law, good governance, which includes decentralization and respect for fundamental rights, are observed and implemented in candidate countries. And one of the benefits for us as the EU, why we do it, is that it promotes greater stability, peace, and prosperity in Europe as a whole, in our neighborhood. And so the way how our structure is formed in DG ENST is that there are units and directorates responsible for thematic scope of let's say, on a horizontal level of a particular chapter or section for regional policy or procurement or statistics. But then we have also thematic units and departments that work for specific candidate countries in mind. And then if we go...
maybe I will... would like to ask you a question here, because obviously DG ENST is following the progress of Ukraine with regard to all 32 chapters and also economic criteria and other criteria. And you are also issuing this annual report on the level of preparedness of Ukraine. So how would you say, what is your basic assessment? How far advanced is Ukraine on this way? Is it, are we only starting, or are we already doing a good job as for now?
Thanks. And indeed, so what you're referring to annual assessment, it is what we call the enlargement package. And in the following slides, I will touch upon what we do with the enlargement package. And maybe in an effort to answer your question, then we can go to the next slide, and I'll do just that. So and through the enlargement package that we publish once a year, usually around in mid-autumn, around early November, there is a communication, which is a fancy way of saying it's a kind of a lengthy summary of our findings across the board for each country. And then there is a more in-depth analysis in a form of a report for each candidate country. And so within this enlargement package, we try to highlight achievements and challenges that are present in candidate countries. They stem across all 32 chapters, but of course also in areas that are called the fundamentals, or the political criteria. So democracy, rule of law, fundamental rights, good governance, multi-level governance falls there as well, functioning of democratic institutions as well, and public administration reform. So those are handled at the beginning of the report, and then each next section deals with each of the thematic chapters. Now, even though DG ENST is the guiding, kind of like the watchdog force for this, and we cover the progression state of each candidate countries, we do not work alone. we base our analysis and expertise in the very much valued expertise of our fellow colleagues in other line DGs across the European Commission that worked on specific themes or specific topics. For example, DG Santo on, agriculture, or DG Regio colleagues who you have already met that work on regional policy, which I also cover in DG NS. So when we write an assessment on Chapter 22 at the enlargement report, I work with DG Regio colleagues on that assessment. So that's a bit of background how we structure it and how it's formed. And now to your question in terms of where Ukraine stands, I wouldn't say you're just starting, because it's been a few years since candidate country status has been granted to Ukraine, and the first formal steps of accession negotiations have been already taken. And for example, if we look at the 2025 report, it shows quite positive signs in terms of the progress that Ukraine has made. There are half more chapters, so 12 instead of 6, where Ukraine has showed really good progress compared to 2024. And you have improved your preparedness in 7 chapters compared to the 1 that was visible in 2024. So you have definitely done a tremendous job given the circumstances you're dealt with, and it is something to applaud for. And it's a mammoth task that you guys are doing at the government level, but also at the local level. One kind of remark that I want to say about the enlargement package is it is a benefit to the dialogue that I mentioned at the beginning. So as part of the preparation process for the enlargement package, every year we reach out to local stakeholders. And on the ground in Ukraine, multiple NGOs and civil society organizations, but also because decentralization and multi-level governance and regional policy are so crucial in a country, with the size of Ukraine, with such a complex multi-level governance system. We do reach out also to the main all Ukrainian associations of subnational governance, and this is a form of how we want to make sure that we have the best possible overview of actually receiving data on the progress on the ground, what's been going good, what are the setbacks or challenges, maybe what are the really positive outcomes of a reform. However, I have to say that over the past 2 years, we haven't received any replies. So it does come down to maybe sometimes meeting in Brussels to kind of get the information and the feeling of how this is really happening and felt on the ground. So kind of my encouragement maybe going forward is for the members of the all Ukrainian associations, and here we reach out to all of them, not just 1 or 2. If you have the time in the beginning of spring, usually this is when we do it, just have a look and see if there's something you want to highlight or maybe mention that needs to still be kind of tackled going forward. And this year, yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely, and I would just mention that in principle, Ukraine's case is a unique case because I could not remember any other candidate country who will be integrating into European Union and at the same time being in active phase of war for independence, and it sometimes creates so many contradictions. On Tuesday this week we discussed that the EU integration will have great impact, for instance, on communal enterprises, that they need to be corporatized, that the municipalities will not have that much control over them over the time, but at the same time that the mayors in frontline areas rely so much on these communal enterprises to have normal functioning of municipalities in times of war, when you have shellings, when you need to clean streets, when you need to have transport going, and where private companies do not always want to take risks. So these cases should and need be addressed to national government leading negotiations on Ukrainian side, and also to DGNS. Actually, thank you for mentioning this consultation process. I think it's really very important that you encourage everyone to participate in this process, and that's really important to raise these issues, not because that we cannot cope with something, but I think that if a European Commission would know about such issues, then the solution could be found in a dialogue between European Commission and the government. And here we really need to have data from the ground. We need to have real practical examples of these issues. Thanks a lot. Coming back to the presentation. Yes, we will now speak about solidarity of European Commission with Ukraine, right?
Yes. And it ties very well together with what you just mentioned about, communicating and providing insight from what's happening on the ground, because our solidarity is comprised of, providing support and engaging with Ukraine across a multitude of areas and support mechanisms. As you see, I've listed some in the bullet points, and accession negotiations as such is just one of the first big 5 ticket items. Of course, there's financial support to the budget of the to the national budget of the country, to sustain it, and there is of course military assistance, humanitarian aid, energy security, and accountability of the aggressor state, and over the years, since 2022, we have now as a Team Europe approach. So this is not only pure EU money, but also the money that comes from EU member states. We have accumulated support of 194.9 billion, which is almost 195 billion. And it continues to grow and progress. One of the elements we're working on currently is the Ukraine support loan, which maybe you have heard in the form of 90 billion. Part of it is gonna a large part of it is gonna go to military assistance, but then some part of it is gonna go also in support of the budget of the country. You mentioned the 100 billion at the beginning of my presentation. It is, kind of, let's say, work in progress. It's part of the idea for what had been mentioned by the president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, kind of a year ago in the summer. And we'll see where the negotiations on the next multi-annual financial framework go in terms of how the where this money is attributed and what kind of specific programming is put for the use of this money. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, Ukraine facility is presently the main driving force of our support to Ukraine. Yes, it deals with recovery, reconstruction, and modernization. And more crucially, it's aligned with what the government of Ukraine has said to us or has put down as their EU accession path or EU path in the form of Ukraine plan. And so it's been almost 27 billion euros, which have been provided to Ukraine in a form of direct assistance. And just before we move on, I just want to finish that on our DGNS, but also on the Commission webpage, we publish quite regularly fact sheets and overviews of our assistance. And I'm sorry to say that in one slide, I was not, able to fit in all the programming and approaches that we have that are active in Ukraine, but those are available online. Or you can also consult, of course, the EU delegation in Kiev for a specific area that you have in mind or that you want to know about what the EU does in that area. Because really, when it comes to Ukraine, we do engage in, dare I say, in almost, I think, all areas related to accession chapters. But at the end of my presentation, there is also a link to open calls and grants that the Commission publishes from time to time, which you guys can take a look at. Okay, now we go to decentralization. So if the first part of the dialogue with local level focuses on enlargement report and on the European Commission trying to understand what's the situation on the ground so that we can provide best analysis and recommendations for the country going forward and understand where it stands on its accession, let's say, accession path. Then more specifically, when it comes to local level, we look at multi-level governance and decentralization. Decentralization is is part of good governance. It's part of rule of law, and for us, we don't view them as just technical reforms that need to be ticked as a box. Something like, I know that there are reforms related to making sure that a laboratory is safe and sound according to European standards. So that would be a technical reform. But when it comes to decentralization, it's very much, structural and political reform, which is part of Copenhagen criteria, and it's a very horizontal element, as many of the people present here today can attest to, that it's not only about making sure that the local self-government authorities are trained to do something, it's making sure also that the legislation is sound, that the local decision-making is open, and there's good consultative procedure going on. And through our job with multi-level governance, what we try to make sure is that the candidate country is able on all governance levels to, first of all, absorb a key, which basically means that if there is a national legislation passed, that subsequently it is also applied and implemented at the local level, that the local level and the national level can uphold democratic governance and rule of law. And very much crucial is the element of subsidiarity principle, which basically means that the power is exercised at the lowest governance level. This, for example, is something that is presently an open discussion and open reform on delineation of powers. Furthermore, apart from that, we want to ensure that the candidate country has adequate administrative capacity, which in turn would have the ability to have effective management of funds. Probably my regional colleagues already told you about, cohesion policy and structural funds, because I know Marta mentioned the partnership principle, so they couldn't have mentioned partnership principle without explaining cohesion policy a little bit, but you can see that it's all tied together. And it's a symbiotic process. And just to kind of give you a perspective of how horizontal decentralization and multi-level governance is. So when we do the enlargement report, or when we did the screening with Ukraine, we looked at elements that relate to decentralization and multi-level governance under cluster 1 and cluster 5. So cluster 1 is on fundamentals, because it's a fundamental Copenhagen criteria-based political reform that the EU looks at. And then under cluster 5, it's all about funds management, administrative capacity at the local level, clear distribution of functions among governance tiers. So that's kind of the scope where we are. Next. Thank you. And that's why we have, since 2016, really invested quite a lot of efforts in supporting decentralization in Ukraine. And of course, over the years, I know there's been other complementary projects from other states, including the Swedish project Solar, which Cities for Cities is very familiar with. The EU project is a bit differentiated. So most of you have heard about You Lead with Europe, which is one of our, flagship technical assistance projects. However, we provide support for decentralization under multiple tiers of Ukraine facility. And under multiple projects that are covered from the Pillar 3 of Ukraine facility, and I'm going to get to that. But the one thing that I kind of wanted to highlight is we've been consistently supporting decentralization since 2016. We have provided a bit over 600 million presently to these efforts. And we do understand that the decentralization reform is, continuously evolves, and there are some things that are, still open to be addressed. And you can see on the slide, I've put down a few examples, but if I can pick out kind of a few that we are currently very much focused on, it would be making sure there's a continuation and conclusion of the delineation of powers reform. Then kind of trying to see whether there's enough financial capacity to exercise powers. And another one that is very much tied also to Chapter 22 and the structural funds is the reducing corruption at the local level. So these are the few that we look at. Thank you. So facility. I wanted to kind of make clear a little bit. So Marta, at the beginning of my presentation, you said that EU provides financial support to Ukraine, which is also available to the local level. It is true. The support is available, but I think you mentioned the word direct, which it's not. So it's the EU mostly manages the financial support indirectly, meaning we have we make agreements or contracts with implementing institutions or contracting partners So, for example, the decentralization project is implemented by the German GIZ agency rather than somebody that we hire and manage. So I just wanted to make sure that it's indirect management of funds. And within each of the three pillars of the Ukraine facility, the approach is the same. So pillar one, it is indirect management through the government of Ukraine. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard 20% as a trigger word. And it's a part of investment-based reform, which is part of the pillar one. So under pillar one, we support Ukraine's government in implementing what is known as the Ukraine Plan, which includes a plethora of reforms meant for recovery, reconstruction, and modernization, especially also at the local level. And so far, it's been we've provided almost 70% of the funds have been paid out until December 2025. Then pillar two is all about investments, and there the indirect management happens through international financing institutions. So it's all about trying to make sure that we have contracted the best proposals that are offered from international financing institutions towards the support for public investment projects. For the local level, it mainly means infrastructure for critical services and utilities. And here we have already allocated 8.4 billion, which is almost the full amount. However, the critical element here is it is kind of like allocated, adopted, but is not yet contracted fully. That's why there's kind of like a timeline discrepancy. And then pillar three, again, it's technical assistance. A lot of it goes in different sectors to the local level. But again, it's indirect management through projects that the EU supports in Ukraine. That's kind of for you guys to understand the buildup. And then now I'm going to explain what we actually do in each of the slides. This is an overview of kind of the completed policy Ukraine plan requirements that we had, except for delineation of powers, which I already mentioned is still pending. It's an ongoing effort by the Ministry of Development and by the RADA, Local Self-Government Committee, to push forward. And so I will choose to spend a bit more time explaining the 20%, which is the next slide, please. And on the 20%, this is where we are receiving most of the comments. I would say out of all of the three pillars, this is maybe the most readily available financing for the local level in Ukraine. Yes, in essence, we're talking about 1 billion, a bit over 1 billion euros that we've made available to repay the government of Ukraine based upon their reporting that they have allocated a specific amount of money that adds up to 1 billion to the needs of the local level for recovery and reconstruction and modernization. So by the middle of this year, we are expecting the government of Ukraine to report to us that they have invested or provided support in the amount of about 200 million, which would be the 5% of the 1 billion. And by the end of 2027, we expect the full 1 billion to be provided. In another outreach I did not so long ago, also with a few representatives of the local level, and the Ministry of Development, I explained that there is no specific criteria that obliges the government to only focus on one area or only focus on a specific territory. It is up to the government to decide what is the best course of action based on what the local level says that is needed. That's why there are single project pipelines. That's why there's regional policy planning. There are presently subvention programs that the government offers for national funding. So this is your way of attaining the funds, which we eventually are planning to refund to the government of Ukraine. That's the essence of 20%. And then investments. I just wanted to highlight two things when it comes to Pillar 2 and investment logic towards municipalities. When we have calls for proposals for investments, we make sure that we want the municipalities to be the beneficiaries, and among others. But when it comes to municipalities, the importance for us is the multi-level governance principle and bottom-up approach. So decision-making and needs-based assessment from the bottom up. And then investments in municipal projects are kind of our driving force, where we want to kind of see the benefit get to the municipalities. So either you being available to get loans for municipal companies or capacity building, that's kind of what we're looking for. And then in the next slide, what you will be able to see is that presently from Pillar 2, we have signed 1.95 billion euros in guarantees and grants. Again, they are not yet contracted, they are approved. So it's a process. And all of this is for municipal investments. These are eligible financing institutions that had replied to the open call for proposals from the Commission, and the eligible financing institutions are the one that submit the proposal, explain what they want to do, how they want to do it, how long it's going to take, and what is the area of focus, what are the eventually the beneficiary municipalities. It's really up to the eligible financing institution. And then there is a certain criteria that has to be done when the proposal is made and how it's made. But presently, the 1.95 billion euros is supporting various municipalities, so investment projects being done in municipalities towards water and wastewater, district heating, solid waste, urban transport, and social housing. These are the areas covered presently, and these areas are granted specifically because we were able to understand that this is where the needs lie. This is what was requested on a continuous basis from the local representatives. And so we took it to heart. We heard you, and so that's what's being done. Another area, which was actually one of the very first guarantees that we signed, was about loans to municipalities. And in my assessment, the ability of receiving loans and loan system in general is something to really take to heart and consider the options, and consider the system as a whole, whether there has to be an improvement made or if everything is fine, because when it comes to loans, there is of course Ukraine Investment Framework support to eligible financial institutions who want to provide municipalities with loans. And these loans are provided under very, positive and advantageous conditions. And they are usually combined with investment grants and technical assistance. And the three kind of main delivery channels for these loans are either sovereign loans to the government of Ukraine, which then in return supports a specific project or action at the municipal level. There is direct financing to municipalities from these loans from the eligible financing institutions, or there is intermediate financing through Ukrainian banks. But we understand that there is a cap that the municipalities have of how much loan they can take. And we understand that the system might not be ideal for the present circumstances, that due to recovery and reconstruction, there is a lot more need to take up financing resources. But then this is something that needs to be checked at legislative level rather than through the Pillar 2 of Ukraine Investment Facility. However, this is available, and my best suggestion is talk to the financing institutions. So, there are the classics, European Investment Bank, the Bank for Reconstruction. Then there is the Scandinavian NEFCO, then a few in France and in Poland that have benefited towards the municipalities from these investment calls. So, try to talk to financing institutions if you really have an idea, and see if they want to apply for an open call for the grant. That's how the investment framework works. And now when we go to Pillar 3, this is technical assistance to really empower the local level. And this is where, if you recall, the previously mentioned a bit over 600 million, I think it was 645 million that we've spent in decentralization. This is where it goes. And I've wrote a few examples of the type of actions that we support from Ukraine facility, from Pillar 3, presently in Ukraine for decentralization and for multi-level governance. So, of course, the main one is You Lead with Europe. That's our flagship project. They really have trainings across all regions, and they do not only engage with the government about legislation, but they also are very present with the local level. And the next one is an action which already finished at the end of 2025. It was called EU for Recovery, and it benefited with 36 million. The kind of continuation of that, but with more emphasis on public investments, is EU for Reconstruction. It's the new action we started at the end of last year. It has 15 million from the Ukraine facility. However, it is co-financed with EU member states, and the total budget of EU for Reconstruction is actually 37 million. As well as You Lead with Europe, total budget is, I think, 62 million, because it's also financed with EU member states money. Then we contribute to Mayors of Economic Growth Facility. Present, you know, the present function is still open until I think autumn this year. I still don't know what's going to happen with this going forward. And then there are a few civil society projects that we are presently financing that that have a total amount of 18.1 million. Mainly these actions are for capacity building and training and explaining things and you know, trying to support you in project preparation, explaining what you know, the documentation requirements, how to fill it in and stuff like that. But that's really the reason for that is because we see a lack of this knowledge, and helping you to really boost this capacity will make you more equal on the what, you know, when you do open calls or when you submit grant proposals and stuff like that. On the last slide of my presentation, there are a few useful links for your information. Of course, the social pages of the European Commission on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and on the right side, there's a link to where we have the fact sheets and the key achievements. So these are from February. There's the enlargement report, of course, and the EU funding and tenders portal.
Thanks a lot, Anna, for this comprehensive presentation. I think we all understand better the mechanisms EU Commission take to support Ukraine, to support the reform pace. Thank you very much for joining us today, and also always welcome to Cities for Cities training courses. We are so happy to have you here with us. А я нагадаю, що сьогодні ми вже завершили 3-й день із 10 навчального курсу «Муніципальні партнерства для європейської інтеграції». Побачимось з вами завтра о цій же ж порі о 10 ранку. Будемо говорити про різні моделі розбудови адміністративної спроможності для реалізації проєктів ЄС. Буде цікаво, доєднуйтеся. Дякуємо вам за увагу і до зустрічі завтра.